So today we're delighted to have Tavar James join us. Tavar is a seasoned expert in marketing events, field marketing, and experiential, with a proven track record of developing high-performing teams and creating strategies that resonate cross-functionally. Tavar has become a passionate champion of events as a powerful marketing and engagement channel. His work with various stakeholders, specifically at the C-suite level, combined with his knack for balancing strategic impact and creativity, make him a leading voice in the industry. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Tavar.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Our pleasure. So good having you. We'll kick it right off. So if you don't mind, within your current role, um, I guess let's go back. Could you give us a sort of cliff notes of how you got to where you are now at this current role?
Yeah, I started my career in hospitality when I was in school, and I was a front desk night auditor. Just picked up a hotel job, just wanting to make some extra money while I was in school. And fast forward a few months into my front desk role, the general manager and the director of sales at the hotel pretty much saw something in me. They loved how I was working with the different guests. They loved my ability to just kind of take on projects and just, do things to make the front desk better. And so they asked me to be their sales and events admin up in the executive office. And from there, I fell in love with events, and I didn't realize I was going to fall in love with events. I took the job just saying, hey, sure, why not? More money, I'll take it. But little did I know that with some mentoring and with some strong leadership, I ended up loving it. And so I started to just follow this path of events in hospitality, which is where I've learned a lot of my skill set in events working across different verticals in the hospitality industry because I was able to work with so many different groups and so many different clients and so many different partnerships. So I climbed the ranks pretty quickly in hospitality. My last role was director of events at a Ritz-Carlton here in New York City. And then I transferred or transitioned, I should say, into corporate event planning, where I was the head of events for a financial services firm. And there I built a pretty robust corporate events team and was there for about 6.5 years. It was a wonderful run. And then I was approached with a new challenge of managing a field marketing and events team globally. And that's where I was at. My last company, it was a tech company, a SaaS company, and I was there for about 2 years. And then I decided that I wanted to do what I do to do, which is events, but do it for a company where the mission and the work that the company is doing resonates a little bit closer to my heart. And that's where I'm at now. I'm the head of events for BetterUp, which is a human transformation company. And their mission and their objectives are just more in line with my day-to-day aspirations and just who I am as a person. And so it's been great so far.
I love that. And yeah, a lot of that, I think the trends that I'm picking up on and even eventually or from your inception, I would say, and going from hospitality to then events and corporate as well as globally, have there been any I guess, the lessons or part of that journey that in hindsight now you're sort of realizing like, okay, that was perfect for what I'm doing now or perfect for the next level up of the scale, right?
Yeah, I think all of it. It's more recently where I've been doing more public speaking and sharing my story, where I've really been able to realize that my career trajectory and my career path has been awesome. I owe a lot of my people skills, my ability to report up and out across different organizations, my ability to connect with the C-suite, my ability to manage and coach, but also my ability to learn. I've learned so much throughout my career, and I can honestly say that every step that I've taken was worth it and was definitely needed. Um, I think what I love the most about my career is that it definitely wasn't one of those things where it was handed to me. I didn't graduate from college and step right into like a leadership role because of my degree. And then, from there it went upwards. I really started from the bottom with working at a hotel at the front desk. And not to say that's the bottom of like a career, but path that most people take in just corporate America. I started at a very junior level. I think that's the better way to put it. I started at a very junior level, making beds at hotels, checking in guests, working the line in the kitchen with the chef for different events. And so I really feel like my people skills and my ability to relate and be empathetic, my vendor relationship skills, all of that I owe to every step in my path. And so I would say no, there's nothing that I would say I would change. All of it was necessary, all of it was worth it, and I wouldn't change any of it.
Yeah, and it's you bring up a good point of, whether it's the college degree in an MBA or specifically in hospitality or marketing, there are still sub skills, like you mentioned. To be able to learn is a skill, right? To be
Yeah,
able to teach, you could be a great, event producer or a great strategist. That doesn't mean you know how to teach and coach and lead. That's its own
right,
skill. So it sounds
right.
like you were intentional in and had these opportunities. You mentioned mentors, you mentioned the landscape of cultivating sort of the nuanced skills that take somebody being curious and open-minded. As you mentioned, empathetic. We know in
Yeah,
hospitality, we know in events, the most successful organizations and individuals are those that really care about all stakeholders, the
yep,
end consumer, the end, the vendors, obviously partners, obviously your clients. So I think that's
yeah.
super powerful.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of people have been asking me, especially people that ask me to mentor them, a lot of them have been asking me, where do I start? I'm graduating soon. Where do you think is the best place to start? Or, I've realized I love doing events, so I want to start to do it more professionally. Where do I start? And I do. I direct all of them to hospitality. See if you can get an events role or an admin role in an events team or a marketing team in a hotel or at a convention center, because it's there that you learn empathy. You learn how important it is to be a people-centric leader. You understand the relationship between vendors and how important that relationship is. And then also, what I loved about starting in the hospitality industry is that when you get into corporate event planning, you start to stick to a vertical, right? I'm a corporate event planner in fashion. I'm a corporate event planner in sports. I'm a corporate event planner in whatever, right? In the hospitality industry, because of all the groups that come in and out of your hotel, one day you're working on an event for, someone in the NBA, like a Brooklyn Nets, for example. I'm using my own story as an example. Working for the Brooklyn Nets one week, the next week I'm working on a group for American Idol. The week after that, I'm working on a national dance competition. And so you really start to learn all the different nuances of all the different types of events. And so I think it's such a great starting point for anyone who wants to get their hands dirty in the events world.
That's a good call out. Yeah, and especially because to sort of piggyback on that, it takes a certain curiosity, especially say if you're a young person or just an ambitious or a caring person, right? Most of the times it's a little bit of all, right? To have the
Sure.
energy, right, in our youth, or just to have the motivation and drive, no matter what stage of life you're at, to care that much, to understand that nuance, to be
Yes.
that curious, to actually take that and then just not be a, sort of checklist item. I did this, I did that, but actually like use that, as you mentioned, to be people centric, to see how do
Yeah,
I better serve my organization, the project, and those involved. So I think that's a
absolutely.
massive, massive point. And to that point, now, as you mentioned, even going into verticals, um, and as a passionate advocate for how events actually drive the bottom line, especially recently, we are now seeing more of, and I shouldn't say recently, but it's somewhat new, of CEOs and the larger landscape seeing the ROI of events. That used to be a little bit foggy, murky in the past. With what have been some of the most effective ways that you've seen events directly impact organizations towards their key objectives, either for the project or for the marketing campaign or sales aspect of the organization in general?
No, I think that people are realizing that you can only do so much behind a screen, and that the power of human connection in person is invaluable. You can't replace it. And I think the pandemic has heightened that realization. And so what I find is that your C-suite is not necessarily so focused on return. They want return. If you're investing X amount of dollars into events, obviously they want to see a return. But I think more importantly, they're looking at it as an avenue, a channel, a lever, and they're realizing how important that lever is. And so it's not a question of we're only doing events if there's ROI. I think the tone has changed to we need to do events. How do we make sure we're doing them in a way where it does produce ROI, right? So it's not a question of should we do them? It's a matter of we are doing them. How do we make sure that we're doing them in a way that is productive to the business? And I think that's a very important angle that a lot of people are starting to realize. I think pre-pandemic, a lot of C-suite people were asking the question of, should we have events? When you talk about budget cuts, I think it's one of the first things that would go.
Right.
Whereas now, I think everyone is beefing that up in their organizations, trying to find ways that they can better support that function. How do they build a centralized events function within their organization? Because they're realizing that so much more can be done. Deals can be progressed, conversations can be had, impact can be had, impressions can be made, marketing touch points can be had in such a more robust manner when it's in person. We just wrapped up a go-to-market all-hands call, and one of the things that one of the sales leaders says, we encourage you to get in front of your contacts.
Mm,
And when he said get in front, he specifically said you can only do so much behind Zoom or behind a screen,
yeah.
right? And so I think that a lot of people are realizing that it's true and that there is so much that can be done in person. So I I'm happy to see that the C-suite is jumping on board. As an events person, I'm so happy to see that our industry is changing so much so rapidly. Um, and I'm also happy to see that the conversation is shifting from do we to how do we do it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah. The how aspect is really something that jumps out. And even as you said, obviously we're going to speak our own game, right? If you're like, well,
Hmm.
what's the best way? Well, marketing is going to say marketing, sales is going to say it's sales, HR is
Hmm.
HR. Everybody wants to sort of obviously champion their cause or their area of expertise or familiarity. But I think, yeah, as you mentioned, now from the collective, you do see this sort of aspect. And one of the best, I think, comparisons is like the whole golf course days, right? Like your C-suites, your high level, high leverage activities and high net worth individuals. You're at the golf course, you're at these places where there are these sort of nuanced ways to connect. There's also a way to learn about the person. And so events are almost like our landscape, corporate landscape, even outside of corporate, music, talent, entertainment. They've always had events, right? If you look at, say, like entertainment, there's always been events that have been the networking sessions. Well, it's the same thing. We're activating, whether it's the consumer partnerships, different stakeholders who will either be part of a project, who are looking for a solution to some of their projects. So why wouldn't, like, the two good old boys at the golf course be able to sort of shoot it and connect and then be like, I like this person, or you know what, I
Yeah,
don't like this person, and same thing. It's a bilateral communication. This
yeah,
actually is a good partner. This actually is not the ideal client I would want to work with. So that aspect of
yeah.
it, I think, gives a lot of data points, as well as you mentioned, because of COVID, a little bit more, or even just the day that the times that we're in, of everything being digital, of everything being behind the screen. We thirst as humans for that human connection.
Oh yeah.
And when it comes to ROI and just the bottom line, the companies, the organizations, the sales teams that know how to make a human feel seen and heard, make decision makers who at an organization are still human beings, understood, then why
Hmm.
wouldn't that be the best way to do business? And why wouldn't that be a great channel for that?
And it's redefining persona. I think in sales and marketing, the word persona is used as a very not specific, but a very general, I should say, actually.
Like
It's used as a
disassociative,
very
maybe?
general, disassociated way to identify your buyer. Whereas I think now, with the power of just remembering what events can do for you and how it really taps into behaviors, the word persona is looked at in a very different way, right? Like, for example, we are very specific in like figuring out not just persona from a buyer's journey, but persona from like what are they like? What are they into? If I invite this person to this event, is it really going to make them tick? And that may be one way for one person in my ICP versus different for someone else in my ICP, yet they may have the same title, right? And so typically in sales and marketing, the same title, you would assume the same persona, same behaviors. But with the power of events, we are now starting to uncover that persona is a much more broad term that can be used to uncover behaviors for specific buyers in your journey and not necessarily just for specific titles part of your ICP.
That's a great point. And again, even at a human level, it's just respectful to see people as not monoliths, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, we have to, we don't have the time or capacity, especially as an organization, to sort of have a specific profile, persona, whatever we want to call it, or a general ICP, aim to look at or target.
Right.
But it is more respectful to be like, this is this individual, and let's be a little bit more aware of who they are,
Yeah.
right?
And intentional with understanding who they are so that way your journey mapping and your experience mapping makes sense. It's much easier to weave people into your event when you look at them more as a person or an individual persona versus a title or
Yeah.
an ICP. So it's something that we all should be thinking about as event strategists.
1000%. And recently, I saw you sort of discuss the idea of, your personal activation, right? You made a post where you called out something about you're not a tree in terms of describing like you can move, right? And as
Yeah.
individuals, we go through phases physically, mentally, emotionally, career-wise, where we sometimes forget the fact that we are, we can leave this situation, this organization, this relationship because we have that capability, that freedom as
Hmm.
humans, but
Hmm.
it's very easy to sometimes lose track of that. For you, you're discovering that, right, as you progress in your career, as you sort of learn and have this curiosity. But how do you reframe that sort of aspect of activating others? How can you remind whether it's attendees or partners in event projects that they are not trees, that they can shift in whether it's activating them for the campaign or activating them towards a change for the better, for a solution that you provide, for a cause, a mission?
Yeah, I think you have to look at events and people and the people attending your events. Everyone is on an evolution. People are evolving. I've evolved as a person, which is why I've made that statement, because I think a lot of people feel stuck. When we're building our event strategy, sometimes we feel stuck. When we're building our new brand awareness play, sometimes we feel stuck. When we're thinking about our ICP, where sometimes we feel stuck. But you have to remember that at the end of the day, you're still dealing with people, and people are always evolving. People's perceptions, the way that the people receive things, the way that people look at creativity and influence, it's always evolving.
Yeah.
And so I think as long as you remember that the world is always evolving, you'll want to make sure that the work you do and the people you partner with and the events that you're putting together is evolving as well. Um, Me personally, I use that analogy that you're not a tree because I look at who I was when I was a hospitality events professional. I look at who I was when I was a financial services events professional. I look at who I am now as a tech events professional. And I'm very different across all three stages of my career. And I think that my growth and my change has been great. I don't regret it. I don't wish I didn't change. It's just part of life. And because of those changes throughout my life, I've given myself the grace to try new things. I tried financial services, not thinking I would ever be able to do it because I had no financial services background. And there I was, exactly what they were looking for. I tried tech in the SaaS industry, not thinking I would be able to do tech because I had no tech background. There I was, exactly what they were looking for. And so I encourage people to not feel stuck or stagnant in their careers. The world is your oyster, and you can grow yourself and develop yourself so much as a person when you are able to tap into many different verticals. There are certain things about events and planning events that's very universal, right? It's like the events 101
Mhm.
playbook, right? But if you really want to grow as a professional and you really want to grow as a person and try to be a holistic events person who can tap into different people and different audiences and different segments, you have to try different things. You have to challenge yourself to try different verticals. And so, if you're an events person working in the automobile industry, or you're an events person working in sports and you want to try working in law or working on events in government, go for it. Flex those muscles, try to see if you can do it. It's only going to make you a much more well-rounded professional later on. And I think the same thing applies to when you're working through your event strategy and when you're working through your audience segmentation. Try not to put people in a box. Try not to put your
Yeah.
strategy in a box. Try not to put your creativity in a box. Try to continue to evolve because people are always evolving.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point of it being a muscle, right? And sometimes it's not as simple to connect the dots between you as an individual and also the individuals or the strategy in terms of the individuals that you're trying to
Yeah.
activate. But I think having either or, once we have that awareness, can help inform that both, say, from a creative lens, if you're designing an experience and you have this more robust idea of the humans there, then you're probably going to create these more unique or more
Mhm.
igniting experiences. But in the same way, that person, maybe they also want to try their hand at entrepreneurship if they've only been in agency creatives. They could also expand that with that same sort of idea of remembering they're not trees. And on the other side, too, like the corporate exec who is just sort of doing the strategy and the high level planning, at some point understanding that will help him inform the people that he's leading and
Mhm.
the trickle down again of that sort of perspective. So I love that.
Like there's something I've been saying lately that kind of helps explain the events professional, and a lot of people said I should trademark it, but kind of crosses across, like it crosses many different verticals and many different experiences. But I always say events professionals, we are master artists at connecting people and places and spaces that ignite a spectrum of experiences. That could be
Mm,
anywhere. That could
yeah,
be any vertical. That could be for any company. So if you could just kind of remember that as what we do and why we do it, you'll realize that you have the wings to fly and do whatever you want.
I love that. Beautiful. Now, with your diverse background, again, touching various aspects of events and teams and leadership, can you share maybe some aspects or maybe some, again, high level views of key strategies that you've used to lead teams that result in successful projects?
Yeah, for sure. First and foremost, you need to tap into your team's strengths and their weaknesses, right? When you join a new organization, you're leading a new team, take the time to ask those questions. What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? What are you currently doing that you wish you didn't have to do? What are you not currently doing that you wish you can do more of? What excites you about events? What really annoys you about events? Ask those questions to make sure that you're understanding what people like to do. Because at the end of the day, you want to have people doing the things they enjoy, first and foremost. I think the second thing is just being a true advocate for your team, making sure that they understand that you are an advocate for them and also a steward of the business, and striking a healthy balance between standing up for them and being at the front lines for them, but also being a true champion of the business and what the business needs. And I think third is continuing to challenge them to be innovative and support their personal and professional development. Now, all of these things are about managing people. I mean, I can get into a whole bunch of other things about managing your C-suite and all that stuff. But when you think about your team and managing your team, you want to make sure that you are challenging them to be innovative, to be creative. And sometimes that means by supporting them personally and professionally. Are you giving them the space to attend industry events? Are you giving them the space to take time off to become inspired again? Most events people at the core of who they are, they're creative people.
Mhm.
And so you want to make sure that you're giving them the space to grow, to learn, to soak up things. And so, even if you have a very daunting and aggressive events season, make sure that you find the time to give your teams space to become inspired and to recharge their battery, which usually means stepping away from the work and either attending something personally with family and friends or attending an industry event. So those would be the three things I would focus on.
Yeah, and that can be, I think, in today's landscape, a superpower with how busy we're getting. Obviously, event
Yeah.
folks have always been just not traditional hours, crazy, sometimes sprints of work. But now that the demand for events in general and yeah, the thirst for the public as well to just connect, there's been a bit more of a bandwidth sort of diminishing for these individuals. So I think leaders, as you mentioned, that sort of cultivate that fertile ground to expand creativity for them, do themselves a service that pay dividends both for their team and that's hard, right? Sometimes, again, if you're managing a smaller team or if you're really sort of bootstrapping, whether the department or the agency, finding that time sort of is an art of sorts.
Oh, for sure.
Now, event marketings, they require adaptability and resilience, as we know, especially, everything is changing. There's always something that needs to be, fixed or updated. How do you navigate these challenges to ensure successful outcome, again, from a leadership perspective?
I think the first thing is just to recognize the challenges that are in front of you and not try to just completely avoid them. And making sure that you're saving space within your bandwidth as a leader, but within your bandwidth as a team to tackle those challenges. I think sometimes we fill our cups too full when we're working through event season or even when we're down season. We just tend to fill our cups too full. We forget to leave space for the inevitable or for the things that we're not expecting. And so I think, you're never going to know what's coming. You're never going to know when things take a shift. But the best thing that you can do for yourself is just leave space for you to be able to tackle those challenges, accept that they are a challenge, and then put in place a game plan of how you're going to overcome it. Um, those are like my high level suggestions. And I think the most important one is just that space. Save that space for those things that you know are coming, whether you like it or not, the unavoidable, the things that you can't predict.
Yeah,
I've started to do that more frequently, I should say, in the more recent years of my career, where I make sure my cup is not too full from a bandwidth perspective.
right.
I make sure that my cup is not too full I make sure that I leave a little bit of space for the things that are unexpected. And I find that when I do that, I'm more equipped and more ready to handle things that are thrown my way that I did not know were coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Personally, last year was sort of that. I called it, I forgot where I picked it up, but it was like the idea of white space, right? Like leaving
Yeah.
room of nothingness, of just a blank space.
Yep.
And for you personally, having the ability to say, if I'm going to work today or if I want to be creative today, I block this time out of nothing space. And that
Yep.
really does, obviously help the creative mind get to churning. But also as an organization this year, sort of realizing that back to, again, the previous question, as well as just a tie into like cross-lateral understanding of, if we're dynamic in the way that we create space for our team, or the individual is aware and dynamic in the way that we plan and leave that sort of buffer of white space, why wouldn't that allow sort of the room for growth? And as you said, when things sometimes, hit the fan, as sometimes tends to happen, you have that adaptability and you're also being realistic. Life is life. You can't control traffic, you can't control Wi-Fi connection, you can't control security sometimes, you can't control
Hmm.
aspects of events or just life,
Yeah.
toddlers,
Yeah.
everything that we tend to think that we can, right? A lot of our culture, especially in our world, tells us that we're type A, we're drivers, we're going to change it. And I think, again, that sort of almost counter approach of the acceptance, the openness, lets you be a lot more adaptable to really serve the grander mission of that project or of the organization.
Yeah. Agree. Totally agree.
Now, while your work is obviously strategic and result focused, and as you mentioned earlier with that beautiful quote, we're both creatives and sort of activating in these spaces. How do
Hmm.
you balance that for yourself, being creative, being strategic, and again, from an energetic bandwidth, sort of creating obviously the memorable experiences and the meeting the KPIs for these projects, but sustaining that for yourself in the long term. We're having sometimes not even sometimes, we all have a finite maybe level of gas in our for our day or for the season or in our career. How do you sustain those areas of strategic and creative thinking for yourself?
Yeah, I just make sure that I strike a balance, a healthy balance between personal and professional, and I try to stay inspired. You notice on my LinkedIn that I post a pretty healthy balance of industry stuff pertaining to events, but then I also post a lot about just personal well-being and positive psychology. And so I think it's important to just have balance in your life. And striking a healthy balance equips you with the desire to be great in both of those areas, if that makes any sense,
Yeah,
right? Knowing that you have a balanced mindset makes you want to be more creative. It makes you want to tap into that creative side more.
yeah,
And it makes you want to be more strategic. It makes you want to be more focused on the business because you know that you're so balanced, right? So it makes it, and you want to keep that balance. So it makes you pay more attention to both of those things to make sure that you are maintaining that balance. So my secret sauce, which is not much of a secret, but it's really just to just stay balanced in how much you are focusing on the things that drive you and light a fire under you and keep you creative. And then also make sure you're focusing on business outcomes, your team, the company. I'm just striking that healthy balance.
that makes a lot of sense. All right, so last question now. With your experience in developing teams cross-functionally, what are some of the best practices for managing expectations and influencing change while working with various stakeholders, maybe even various simultaneous projects?
Yeah, I think some of the best practices that I've always tried to implement is just making sure that your team has clear roles and responsibilities, and making sure that everyone understands their swim lanes. For me, it's very important that my team wakes up and knows what they're supposed to be doing and what their job is and how they're impacting the business and how they're impacting the team. And while I know that a lot of teams have to work under ambiguity and scrappiness, and sometimes lanes get blurred, I do think it's important to take the time to sometimes pause and make sure that your operations are refined, and to
Yeah.
make sure that there's clear lines of sight into people's roles, responsibilities, scopes of work, who drives. You know, I think it's very easy to kind of get lost in the idea that everyone just helps everyone, which is great, and that's how it should be. And that is the character that you look for in a team member, right? When you're hiring someone, you look for that characteristic of teamwork and roll up my sleeves and help to get things done. But then on the other side of that, when you think about developing your team and coaching your team and supporting their professional development and their professional goals, you really can't do that unless you understand their scope and their roles and responsibilities, and unless that is clearly outlined for them. Reason being is because part of helping someone grow and develop and coaching them is accountability and making sure that you're holding them to a standard or holding them to a certain caliber of work. And it's harder to do that when someone doesn't have clear roles and responsibilities. And so I think one of the best things you can do as a leader, to support cross-functional work, to support multiple work streams, to support your team and their growth, is making sure that your expectation of them is very clear and not in a dictatorship way, but it's very clear in a sense of this is how you impact the business. And when you are at peak potential in this space, here is how you drive or move the needle forward. And just holding them to that level of accountability. So that's what I would say. Clear roles and responsibilities, tight processes, and then having a team full of people who have strong character around teamwork.
Yeah. You touch on a lot of great points there, and I think there's a beautiful way to sort of tie a ribbon on this because the aspect of lacking uncertainty, as we talked about earlier, there's always going to be uncertainty. There is chaos. There's the right amount of order and chaos that you're introducing and also managing as a leader. But I love that approach of having both the lack of ambiguity as best as you as a leader can support, both from the individual team member, as far as like there is no uncertainty on what they need to do in terms of like their priorities or even the roles, and then they can sort of be creative and fluid, step in, but not step out of bounds in a distractive way, which often happens when those lines are, again, lines will be blurred, but when those lines and expectations are not clear, and it's a disservice to them, right? It's a better way of leadership when you're like, when there needs to be a reprimand or praise. That is what every team member really wants, right? That's what every child wants. That's what every partner in any situation wants, right? Anybody who is being led and protected or protecting and leading needs to provide that. So I love how you frame that, and also the aspect of character. We've been kind of on a trend on this podcast of this three-prong approach of skill set, right? And it's the technical skill set. If you're technical creative and your production side and your managerial side, communication, then there's a character skill set. And so, as you mentioned, vetting for that in the interview process, but also cultivating that character. And then obviously the mindset approach, which is fit with everything we've been talking about before, with balance, with, belief, with just the human connection. And so I think like this is a great way to really focus those three areas of skills, character, mindset, and actual technical skill sets in a way that really does trickle top down from leadership, and on the bigger version of the individual, the organization really does see progress move along in a more refined way.
Yeah, and people feel like they have more of a sense of belonging, like they're part of a bigger purpose, like they know why they're here, they know their
Mhm.
purpose. They just know how they contribute to the business in a very clear way. And sometimes when swim lanes are too muddied or too integrated, it's harder for people to really recognize how they truly and individually impact the business. Now, again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that cross-functional work and team collaboration and helping one another out and scrappiness is not good. It's good for all of us to grow. Even the most seasoned professionals still grow through scrappiness and ambiguity. It's always going to be there. But what I fear is that some organizations fall into a place where the scrappiness and the ambiguity becomes norm, and that's where I would caution them because that's not sustainable. And so we want to make sure that we're working in an environment or in a model where we are reducing the chance of we're reducing the risk of not having good luck, right? Because a lot of times when you're working like that, it works out, but it is pure luck that it worked out, right? So you want to make sure that you have a model in place that really supports the work you're doing, so that way you're reducing the chance that shit falls apart.
Sustainability in that aspect is definitely part of that. So
Hmm.
I'll go so sort of at a high level of everything that stood out for me, and then just feel free to fill in anything that, I
Yeah.
might have missed in our conversation. But the first thing is just remembering the steps of our career journey, as you mentioned, from your beginnings in hospitality. All of us, and we know this on a maybe intellectual level sometimes, that everything is meant to be, everything happens for a purpose. But I think you point out a great example of just remembering the steps of your career, your journey, are often necessary in hindsight. And so if we can remember that, 50-year-old us or maybe 30-year-old us, if we're in our 20s, and any version of us can sort of help truly um, operationalize trust in the process with that mindset, right? That was the first thing. The second is the mentorship tip. I love how, you mentioned starting in a place, whether it's hospitality or anything that lets you really be people centric in order to leverage it into just being a better leader, a better part of a team. And I also think, I wanted to interject the idea that people centricity, whether you're starting in service business or sales sometimes, can start at any moment, at any level. But obviously, if you're young and scrappy and just hungry and have that bandwidth, it's a great, tip for mentorship,
Yeah.
for development. The third thing that stood out is being aware of the evolution of ourselves and of others, in terms of that being a key aspect for truly activating. We're not a tree, as you mentioned, we can move, but also if we recognize that within the audiences we serve, within the stakeholders, we can respect that evolution and be more impactful.
Hmm.
And then the last one I think is just the idea of full engagement. When we talk about not just work-life balance, but from a organizational as well as an individual point, the idea of full engagement is like not to overstress, right? Like a muscle. If a muscle is being just beat, 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 and not rested, it's gonna tear. It's gonna have not a good tear. It will fall, right? And same thing, if a muscle is not worked and it's just laid, to do nothing, it will atrophy. So the
Hmm.
full engagement of as a strategic thinker, leader, as well as a holistic human being, having that sort of balance to fill your cup, I think is a great call out. Anything I missed or anything you might want to add?
No, 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 that's it. That's you nailed it. And I think in a world of AI and automation and all that fun stuff, the best thing we all can do, and not only as leaders, but just as people who work with people, is just remember that we're people. And remember that there's more to people than an employee number. There's more to people than a resume. There's more to people than, you know, their latest accomplishment, and there's more to people than their latest failure, right? And so I think empathy and leading from a place of empathy and courage will go a long way. And I think more than ever, we have to remember that, which is why I love what I do and I love our industry, is because we are always at the forefront of connecting people and reminding people that we are people, and reminding people of the importance of human interaction. And there's no better profession than events professionals that are lucky enough to be at the forefront of doing that every single day. And
So true. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Tavar. Where can people learn more about you or sort of keep up with your journey? Anything you might want to plug in?
yeah, no, just follow me on LinkedIn. I usually do my four things on a Friday, and I'm always dropping a lot of um, insights, both personally and professionally. And I tend to try to keep a good balance on LinkedIn because I feel like everyone on LinkedIn is a know-it-all. So I try to I try to balance it between, positive psychology and just how you can just be a better person while also balancing some good events industry insights. And so if you need someone to follow and want to connect, feel free to just find me on LinkedIn, Tavar James.
1,000%. Well, thank you so much. Looking forward to our next convo.
Thanks so much.